Hello everyone, Joellen here, and welcome to today's portrait demonstration. I chose this photo for today's demonstration because I love the strong shadow shape on the left-hand side. I love that her gaze is going off to the right, and I love that her mouth is just a little bit open. Here is a list of my materials. Similar to last week's demonstration, I'll begin with somewhat of a loose version of the sight size method of drawing. My plan is to start off in a 1-to-1 ratio aspect, and I will just drag over some lines that represent the top of her head, the bottom of her chin, eyebrows, so on and so forth. The pencil I am using is a 2H pencil, and I apologize if it's a little hard to see. Normally I like to start with a lighter pencil just to put in my basic lines, and as I darken up my picture as I go along, I will slowly progress to a blacker or darker pencil. As you can see, I am sketching in an oval for the shape of her head. I'm putting an indication in of her neck and a little suggestion of her shoulder and hand. Next, I add in the medial line, and then I put in key markers for the features. Once I have basic shapes in, I will then go and refine the outlines and really closely examine the relationships of all of the different shapes. My goal is to get a nice linear block-in or cartoon. If you are just starting off in portraiture or you need a review, here is an excerpt from today's class.
All right. So if you're beginning, you can think about the cranium, which is a circle. It doesn't have to be like the perfect circle. And I'm going to think about the jaw. But because I already know she's on a tilt, the jaw's not going to be underneath. It's going to tilt with the whole head. Now that looks like a pretty good position, right? Neck coming off and maybe one shoulder lower, one shoulder higher. And we'll get into those a little bit. But just design, composition, this is pretty good. I can use my skewer. If you do not have your skewer today, I can get you one. And try to find the mid-mark. You could start at the tear duct on that eye that's on my left-hand side to bottom of chin. And then I come up and go back to that tear duct. So that is a little high. Maybe it's right. I'll tell you, one of these days I'm going to trade in my eyeballs for better ones. It's awful what age does to your eyes, right? Okay, for all you, Julie and Sam.
They're not great already, so.
All right, Dad. Okay, so I find that the tear duct I'm measuring is somewhat in the middle, and if you read like books and everything on this, you're going to find that maybe you'll find they say more the lower lid, somebody might say the upper lid, whatever. You know, you need to do your own measuring to find out. All right, so I have a measurement for where I feel like the middle of this will divide. All right, so again, I'm going to think about, well, what's the spacing between the tear duct and the eyebrow, considering all of this, right? I have to consider the whole thing. And I feel coming up an amount right about here is pretty good. It may be if the head was tilted down, this would be a little bit closer. And then if I take this mark to this mark and I divide it in half, somehow, magically for me, it always gets to the bottom of the circle. All right, and again, I'm thinking about the midline and the diagonal coming down. I can use my skewer to try to see if I can find that that line and that angle. All right, so eyebrows to chin, we divide into two. We get a relationship with something in the bottom of the nose. We take this amount and this amount, we come up one more section that's even, and we should have some relationship with the hairline, all right? Hairline maybe around there, but now we're gonna take bottom of the nose to chin, divide it into thirds, and we'll get the part of the mouth, and the mouth usually comes down, and at the end of the mouth, I always like to pull it up just a little bit, and then we'll have a relationship with the crevice of the chin. So you can see already we're getting somewhat human. All right, from here, what I can do is I can figure out, I only see one ear, so if I can do a couple of things. I can either keep everything on a diagonal and try to think about the relationship, top of the eyebrow, right a little bit below is where I'm seeing a mark for the ear. And I could do the same with the lower part of the ear, which seems to have a relationship with the nose to get that ear in. Or I can think about relational measuring, which would be more level and seeing where things intersect. So hopefully that makes sense. So, all right, so I have a little bit put together here. And now from here, I'm going to start to just put in some of my features. Because I know once I get this eyebrow in, I can tell the skull is going to kind of cut in on this side. And I can bet you that my skull is going to widen on this side. Because again, I have this 1/3, 2/3. So let me just, I'm going to come around part of the jaw. And then I'll get into the eye socket. And I'll think about how the eye socket from the brow here moves down. And then I start to move over like that. I can get over to this eye socket. And you can see I'm not detailing the eyes yet. Sometimes I do. I'll start to get that eye socket. And if I do things differently than I've done before, it's because every time I approach a portrait, it's always going to be different. You know, sometimes I think it's all about what my mood is for the day. All right. We have mouth, and I can get just the little top lip, and I can really try to look for the spread of that. We don't really see much for the crevice of the chin, and we're going to come over here. But I can tell you when I get over here, I need to do some type of comparative measuring, right? Because I can tell just in drawing that this ear still has to jump a little bit over. So I'm going to get that ear pushed out. But comparative measuring would be taking something that I know to something that I don't know to try to get the positioning of the ear. So if I say top of the eyebrow to bottom of the chin, I turn my hand and I'm getting cheekbone to almost the ear. Okay, so that's going, I was in the right ballpark, right? The ear lobe's going to be right about there. And that's important because it will help me to get that jaw. And then from there, I can continue to come up. Now, when you're making the form of the skull, really try to think about maybe the highest point, so that apex of the head, and that's right about where I see it. Then I can start to curve straight lines, points of change, all coming around. And from, if this is my earlobe, I can look to get a few lines put in for my neck. So my point is, I'm keeping this pretty movable. I know it doesn't look like Denise yet, but I will keep going around this form until I feel I get it right. Once I get this, and maybe some indicators for what I'm seeing with the features, then I'm going to go and look for my shadow shapes. Does that make sense to everyone? Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to have you guys go to work.
I hope you enjoyed that and found it to be helpful. So now I'll just continue to refine my shapes. Once I am fairly happy with the placement of my features, I will start now to add in the shadow shapes. And I want to be very, very specific about what I'm seeing for the shadow shapes. The shadow shape will run down the whole left side of her head, down the forehead, through the eye socket, down the nose, around the bottom of the nose, into the top jaw, encompassing the top lip, over the bottom lip, into the or underneath the lower lip, and then going around the chin. Examine the placement of her ear, making sure I have it at the right height, and then I will start to be a little bit more specific, indicating her hand. Once I am happy with the placement of my shadow shapes, I will slowly and methodically start to fill them in. I'll start with a 2H pencil, keeping everything pretty light. I may decide to go in with my finger or my paper stump just to smooth out some of the values, but you want your values to be pretty consistent and smooth and even. I will do several passes with my 2H pencil, each time slowly and carefully darkening the shadow shapes. As I start to darken everything up, I'll see if there's any variation going on in my shadow shape. So maybe the part of the lip, top lip, as it's pulling down on the right hand side gets a little bit darker, possibly under the nose, the irises. So I'll very gently and gradually start to darken those areas just to separate them a little bit, but I still consider them all to be within the shadowed area. It is important for you to get the shape of the head exactly right, but along with that, you need to also get the exact shape of the features. And if you're like me, it's really easy to get in there and pick away at them. Just try to see what the angles are, put in the shadow shape, see if there's any areas that are catching a little bit of light, such as the the lower lid, the shelf of the lower lid, and just slowly get in there and pick away at these, comparing them to your photographic reference. Teeth can be very challenging, and when I first started off in portrait painting, I would do anything to avoid teeth. And now I actually love and enjoy painting or drawing teeth. One of the things that's very important about it, you have to think about the jaw or the teeth moving around in a cylinder, and as the teeth move back into the head, they get a little bit tighter together. It's very important that you get the correct positioning of the separation between the two front teeth. We often think about teeth being one of the lightest things on our face, along with the whites of our eyes, but really very rarely is that true. Teeth are just somewhat of a cooler temperature. They're bluer compared to maybe the warmer skin tone, and therefore they always look a little bit brighter. But I like to put shadow or a little bit of shade on them. It pushes them or recedes them back into the mouth, and maybe later on taking my eraser and just picking out a highlight or two. As I move along here, I'll just continue to darken and adjust some of my shapes. When I can no longer get my values any darker with the lighter or harder pencil that I'm using, I will switch pencils to something a little bit softer, and this way I can continue to darken my values. I definitely have a love-hate relationship with a paper stump. So sometimes I feel the paper stump just spreads the graphite and deposits it in places and leaves it a little blotchy. Many times I prefer using a lightweight finger such as my pinky. I've now switched to my harder pencil, back to my 2H, and I really like to use this in order to get some of the subtle halftones, and also it helps to smooth out some of the existing graphite. I like to use a cotton pad to smooth out my drawing. I find this technique is very helpful in getting a nice, even gradation. I'll continue to darken up areas that I feel are important, such as the eyes and the nose and areas of the mouth, the hair, and places or parts of the left-hand side of the face. At this point, I'll use my kneaded eraser to pick up any light areas. I'll just use a little piece and I'll mold it into a little point, and I'll pick up the beads in the hair, and then I'll pick up the place in the forehead, that frontal eminence, maybe the highlights that I find on the nose, under the eye, upper jaw, corner, underneath the corner of the mouth. At this point, I'm going to stop with my sketch. Overall, I'm very happy with the results. I had a lot of fun doing this, and I hope you have a lot of success with yours, and I'll see you next time.